Ever since I started living at this house, weird things have happened. It regularly sounds like someone is walking on the outside of the house at night, and it's really starting to freak me and my roommates out. For some context, this is a college house. 4 girls in our 20s just looking for a fun place to live. There have been a few different encounters that have led us to the conclusion that we're being watched by someone, and it all only continues to fall into place. Let's go back to this summer, when the first break-in was. It was an evening in September in the middle of the week. The garage door mysteriously opened. That garage had never been used by us for anything other than storage. One of us was at home with the music blasting. When she first heard it, she didn't really think anything of it. But 5 minutes later, when she went upstairs to check what was going on, she found our garage door wide open and the back door unlocked as well. Again, we did not use our garage. She looked around but found nothing missing. She figured it was a technical thing, or perhaps an accident of some sort. About a month later, we were having a party. It was around Halloween. We had decided to have a costume party. Around 12 or 1 a.m., we'd noticed that someone was in our backyard. We turned and checked to see a man sneaking up the side of our house. The moment the man noticed we'd seen him, he immediately turned and ran away and up the hill, out of sight. It was also around this time we had one of our car's windows broken. Nothing had been stolen from the vehicle, even though there were valuables inside. Only the window was broken. Last night, while driving around, we noticed a car we had seen drive by a few times. We decided to follow it up the hill and see what was going on. The man in this car, a middle-aged white man with a very noticeable receding hairline and arms covered in tattoos, came to a stop right in the middle of the street. He turned around in his car to stare at us, then pulled over to the side of the road. He waited there for a few minutes. We waited 1 street over. We eventually saw him turn left and followed him into the neighborhood in front of ours. The man began driving erratically, and we lost sight of him and drove around the neighborhood a bit more. When driving in the front of our house, though, we were wondering if perhaps he could see into our rooms. We went to look at the view of where he had been driving past. That route had a direct view into my room. The house that had a direct view into my room happened to have the same car that had been driving around our house sitting right in front of it. The car was very distinct, an old white sedan with a black shoe mark on the rear bumper. We immediately went back to our home and looked out the window at the house and realized we had actually seen someone there before. On multiple separate occasions, we'd seen that middle-aged man standing at the window, looking in at our house, or sitting on the back porch in a lawn chair, facing our home. Last night when we went to bed, my roommate had her window open and heard footsteps. She heard our fence gate open and car doors opening as well. The footsteps sounded like they were directly outside her window. I also heard them. Normally, I wouldn't jump to conclusions, but I feel like all these occurrences have to be connected. It's all too much to just be coincidental. If anyone has any ideas or input, please let me know. We're genuinely getting scared. So one night, me and my friends were playing some hide-and-seek in our hometown. We were probably around 13 years old at that time. I went into this small area that was basically like a shortcut from the main road to the side road. I unfortunately went alone. I didn't even think that anything could possibly happen to me. Remember, we were only 13 at the time. We didn't bring phones with us either, so if something did happen to us, nobody would even know. The game started and I ran sprinting into that wooded area. The first 30 seconds went by well. After around 1 minute or so, I started hearing footsteps nearing me. I called out, "Hey, is that one of you guys?" Someone was clearly there, but they didn't say anything. I started to get a bit weirded out. Fortunately, the woods area had a main route and 2 side ones, so I had 2 directions to flee from if necessary. I was just starting to leave when out of nowhere, a man just appeared from out of the woods. He started sprinting right at me and called out to me, "I'm gonna catch ya." It was in such a creepy and eerie way, like he was playing a game or something. Fortunately, I trained in soccer, so I knew I could definitely outrun him, or at least make him tired out. I sprinted all the way through the woods, with the only light being the moonlight. After 2 minutes, he got winded and gave up. I still continued sprinting and got myself all the way back to the area where we'd started. I found my friends and told them what just happened. Of course, no one believed me, but I didn't care since I knew it was real. To this day, I still don't know who that man was that tried to grab me that night, but I know for sure it wasn't a sports guy. If they were, the outcome would have been very, very different. Me and some buddies were bored one night and decided to head out and poke around an old abandoned mental hospital. The only way in was through the autopsy room. The rest of the place was pretty much sealed off. We got inside, and it was me, another guy, and 2 girls. As soon as we entered the autopsy room area, one of the girls started hyperventilating and crying. She said she couldn't stand to be there any longer. We tried everything we could to convince her that everything was going to be fine, but it was all to no avail. She wanted to leave, and she wanted to leave now. Disappointed that our adventure was going to be ending early, we started to leave. The 2 girls were walking in front, one of them trying to comfort the other, whilst me and the other guy were walking behind them. I don't know what brought me to do this, but I felt the sudden need to look backward. Morbid curiosity, maybe. I did so. I'll admit that it was pretty dark, but the moon was out, so it wasn't pitch black or anything. Still, I know exactly what I saw. There was a window on the 2nd floor. As I looked towards it, I could see a face staring back at me. I looked for a good 10 seconds, stopped in shock. My buddy had also stopped. I had him look without taking my eyes off it, and asked him specifically, "Hey, do you see that?" I thought maybe I may have been seeing things, or perhaps it was just a trick of the light. But no, he saw it too. We both stood there and stared for a good 20 seconds. I may have thought it was some kind of trick at first, but after 20 seconds or so, the face began to move away from the window. We ran away, passing the girls and screaming at them to get in the car. What were the chances that other people were exploring at the exact same time as us? I don't know. All I know is that I saw a person standing in that window watching us at the 2nd story of an abandoned mental hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that was scary enough for me. It was my first year at university, completely new to the city and its surroundings. One evening, my friend and I decided to take a trip to the mall. It was around 8 p.m. or so. We got on a bus that my friend claimed would take us right there. Instead, we ended up at an empty bus terminal. It was around 10 o'clock at this time. We waited and waited for another bus to come. There was no one else there with us. A while later, an old man walked by and told us that since it was so late at night, another bus wouldn't be coming for another hour or so. He told us to turn and walk down the road, where we would find another bus stop where a bus would be coming sooner. We followed his instructions and entered a single-lane road with tall trees on each side. There were only a few street lamps working, so the area was very dimly lit. The road was sort of built on a slant as well, so all we could see was the road and the trees on either side for a long distance. Once we arrived, we waited there. My phone battery died in the meantime, and my friend had forgotten hers in her dorm room. We were starting to think that there wouldn't be any bus coming at all. We started to panic. Then, as we were waiting, I turned around to see two people with backpacks walking down the road. I was kind of relieved to see other people around. So was my friend. When they got close, I asked them if they knew about any buses that might come by soon. I noticed these two were kids, about 12 or 13 years old. One was a boy and the other was a girl. "Hey, do you guys know if there are any buses coming?" The boy responded, "Oh, let me check." He took out his phone and was looking at it for a short time. Meanwhile, my friend had started talking to the girl. "Hey, where are you guys from?" The girl didn't respond. The boy eventually looked up and said the bus would be here in 10 minutes. I turned my head to my friend. She was looking at me, and I turned my head back to thank the boy. They had disappeared, nowhere to be seen. I had literally only looked for 1 second max. We both looked down either side of the road and by the trees. We couldn't find them anywhere. Surely we would have seen them. I literally looked away for only 1 second. Needless to say, we were both extremely unnerved until the bus arrived. It was the very last bus, and it was around 12:17 a.m. or so when it finally showed up. I've never believed in the supernatural or anything, but I can't seem to find a reasonable explanation for this eerie experience. This happened to me when I was a junior in high school. It was December and it had just started snowing. That evening, my best friend and I were in debate class and were getting ready for our state qualifiers that were the next day. We were writing out our cases, and as usual, we were right at each other's throats over the details. It was very stressful and tense. We finally finished our cases at around 3 a.m. We decided to go to my room for the night. Almost as soon as we got inside, we heard what sounded like water turning on the other side of the house. No big deal, probably my parents. I thought that at least. Then we heard the front door open. I told my friend I bet my mom woke up and wanted some fresh air. She did that from time to time. I thought that's really what that was. That was until we heard heavy footsteps in my living room, headed right toward my bedroom. They were not my mother or anyone else in my family. My friend and I looked at each other and were both freaked out, just standing there frozen in my room together. We moved closer to each other. The footsteps started again, but this time they were running. We both flipped out. My bedroom door flew open and we screamed. To our surprise, nobody was there. We ran to the bathroom that was connected to my room. I closed and locked the door behind me and stood against it. When we finally built up the courage to do so, we sprinted to my parents' room, crying hysterically. We obviously startled my parents awake. They said neither of them had gotten up earlier. My dad grabbed his gun out of the closet and looked around the entire house, but there was no sign of anyone there. I heard this story from a girl I met in Korea. One day, she was walking home late one night after work. She lived in an apartment where they had an elevator. She got in the elevator on this night, and when the door was just about to close, a man with a red hoodie slipped through and entered the elevator. He apologized for startling her and asked which floor she was heading to. Without making any eye contact out of fear, she told him. As the elevator moved, he asked her if he could use her cell phone. She declined and isolated herself in the corner. After many seconds of silence, the elevator arrived to the floor just below the one the girl was heading to. The door opened and the guy slowly walked out of the elevator. He then turned around to face her. He stared at her with a blank expression. As the doors started to close, from the small gap in between them, she saw the man pull out a knife, put it against his neck and make a slashing motion, and start walking up the stairs towards the floor she was going to. The elevator started to move up. Once she arrived at that floor, she frantically smashed the closed door button. Unfortunately, the door opened anyway. She looked around completely terrified, but the man was nowhere to be seen. She ran to her apartment and rushed inside, then locked the door behind her. She never saw that guy around the complex again. A few years ago, I was living in a fairly nice apartment complex, having a cigarette out on my balcony. It was around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I would usually be on my phone not paying attention, but I got this weird chill. I looked up to see a middle-aged man walking down the sidewalk across the complex. It struck me that he clearly didn't belong here, as I realized he was not one of the residents. As I was thinking this, he suddenly stopped in place and looked right at me, making this eerie, way too long eye contact. Then he rushed off between buildings in the opposite direction of my apartment. I told my husband about this and joked that if we got a knock at our door in the next 15 minutes, we could safely assume it was that creepy guy. Well, sure as shit, 10 minutes later exactly, there was this quiet, faint tapping at our door. My eyes just about popped out of my head. My husband jumped up to grab his gun from the other room. I slowly walked up to the door to look through the peephole, holding my breath. There was the man I had seen, looking right at me through the peephole. I knew he wasn't actually able to see me, but the image of him looking right into my eyes still freaks me out to this day. My husband walked up to the door and stared out through the peephole, then shouted, "What do you want?" in a threatening voice. Apparently, the man had his hand on the doorknob. He jerked back in surprise once he heard a man's voice. The guy asked for Jeremy or some other made-up name, and my husband told him to leave. After trying to bullshit for a little longer, the guy finally walked downstairs. Once he arrived to the ground floor, he peered up into my living room window from the lawn. I closed the blinds, and he moved over to stare at me through the balcony door. He didn't move on until after I shut that one too. We called security and gave a clear description and everything. A few days later, we got a report from our complex that an apartment had been robbed around that time that night. What keeps me up though is this question. If you're going to rob an apartment, why would you go to one that you definitely know a woman is awake and at home, seemingly alone at? When a friend and I were about 13, we went turkey hunting with his dad. We had a nice spot and some cover behind a fallen tree, overlooking a little valley made by the hills. After an hour or so with no luck, my friend and I went to try and find stuff deeper into the woods. There was a lake about 3 miles from the valley, and we were heading towards it to see if we could catch anything drinking. After we got about halfway to the lake, we started to hear these weird sounds around us, branches snapping, something dragging along the ground, etc. As we got closer, the sounds continued all the way out to the lake. We couldn't see anything though. We waited there for about an hour before heading back. On our way back, we veered a little off the original path to try and find out what had been making those noises. We found tracks, feline tracks. A mountain lion had been tracking us for 2 miles. Our only weapon was my friend's old single-shot 20 gauge, loaded with birdshot. If that cat had decided to attack, we would have surely died. Thankfully, it must have lost interest because we made it back to the hill spot without hearing it again. This happened a few months ago. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I had finally bought a car for myself. I love driving around and listening to music. I usually like to do this by myself as well. On this night, it was sometime around 7 p.m. or so. It was in the winter time. On this particular drive, I took 2 of my siblings with me, my sister who was 18, and my brother who was 13. I took them along with me after their constant pleading, because they were so bored inside the house. Now, I'm a smoker, and coming from a South Asian household, women are not supposed to smoke, so I took these opportunities to smoke a bit without worrying my parents would catch me. The city I lived in did have some bad areas, but we lived in a quiet suburban area, so I didn't really give it a second thought about parking somewhere random and getting out of my car. I lit up a cigarette. I didn't like smoking inside. There I was, parked beneath a streetlight, scrolling away on my phone. It was getting pretty dark out, but I wasn't that worried about it. I visited this road quite frequently, and it wasn't far from my aunt's house. As I was smoking my cigarette, though, I just so happened to look up from my phone, only to see a man emerging from some bushes nearby. I didn't really think that much of it at first. I saw people walking around here all the time. This man was very tall, standing at least 6'4". He was on the opposite sidewalk, so I assumed he was just going to carry on walking. I looked back down at my phone. That was until I looked up again and saw the man now standing in front of my car, staring at me. My sister, who was still in the vehicle, must have been watching him as well, because she knocked on the window and told me to get in. I had already put out my cigarette and was making my way to the driver's side door. My keys were in hand. The man was just kind of standing there, not moving a single muscle. I got in and immediately locked the doors. I breathed a sigh of relief. This man hadn't done anything at all, so I thought that maybe I was just overreacting for no reason. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked up to see where the man now was. He was no longer standing in front of my car, though. I looked into my rear-view mirror and could see he was now standing behind the vehicle. He was snapping photos of my license plate. I rolled the window down slightly. I could see his face a bit clearer now. He appeared to be an Indian man with a very thick beard and a hoodie covering his head, obscuring some of the features on his face. I tried to speak to the man as politely as possible. Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" The man came towards my window, but still kept his distance. Immediately, he seemed to be very angry. "Do you know who I am?" Of course, I did not know who he was. I didn't know if he was asking a rhetorical question or not. "I have a lot of shit going down, and I don't need you parking here and watching me. You look real suspicious, just randomly parking here with your 2 friends. What do you think you're doing watching me? Get the fuck out of here." I chuckled nervously. I was trying to keep calm. I didn't understand how we looked threatening in any way. I'm a very small girl who's been told many times she still looks like a kid. We were all in our pajamas, and I was clearly minding my own business. "Look, man, I just park here to smoke. I come here all the time. I live close by." And that's when the man got right up to my window and slid his fingers in through the gap. He forced my window down all the way just by pushing with his hands. He was now screaming at the top of his lungs. "Get out of here!" I screamed in terror and told him to leave me alone. I had kids in the back seat, and he was scaring them. He then got even more angry. "If you don't get out of here right now, I'm gonna make you regret it." My adrenaline was running at full speed. I was so terrified I didn't even bother putting my seatbelt on. I bolted out of there. In my panic, I went straight ahead at a junction that led me to a dead end. As soon as I stopped my car, I took the opportunity to try and calm down. My whole body was shaking. I couldn't even keep my foot on the clutch. My sister was quick to ask me if I was okay, but before I could answer at all, I saw a pair of headlights coming right for us. It was that very same man. He was going at least 50 in a 20 zone and almost slammed right into our car. By some miracle, he just missed us. After that, his car screeched to a halt and he jumped out of the vehicle. That's when I realized my window was still all the way down. I quickly tried to roll my window back up. The man sprinted right for us and practically dove half of his body into my car window. I screamed so loudly, with his ear right next to my face, that I'm sure I must have deafened him. He was trying to grab my car keys from the ignition. I thanked my lucky stars that with my car, to release the key you had to have your foot on the clutch, which I didn't at this moment. I was pressing down on the horn of my car as much as possible to make as much noise as I could. I scratched his hands away from my car keys. I heard my siblings crying their eyes out. My little brother had no idea what to do, and my sister was in the passenger seat experiencing all of this firsthand. I managed to force the man out of my vehicle. That's when he started screaming again. "I thought I told you to get out of here. Now I'm gonna kill you all." The deranged man then attempted to pull my door handle, trying to get inside once more. That's when I floored it. I didn't care that my body was shaking like a fish out of water. My main priority was the safety of my siblings. I knew that we were making a loud commotion. I laid down hard on my horn, trying to get the attention of anyone nearby. Unfortunately, nobody came to help us. I managed to maneuver my way out of the dead end, then went down a new street into a totally different area. I then parked. I knew this probably was not a good idea, but I didn't see the guy following us. The three of us sat there in my car, sobbing away. This was the first time that anything like this had ever happened to us. I called the police and immediately wanted to punch myself in the face when the dispatcher asked if I'd gotten the man's registration number. Of course, in my panic, I did not. I wanted to slap myself. I listened to a lot of stories like this, and I always felt that they had taught me how to handle certain situations. The dispatcher was very understanding, as was the officer who called me the next day. They understood how scary it must have been for me. I cried as I recounted the incident. Unfortunately, the cops informed me that there were no cameras in that area, so there wasn't really much they could do, especially with me not knowing where he came from. I didn't know if he came from one of the nearby houses or what. The officer apologized to me, but it was really my fault for not mentally noting important information. They made a report of the attack though, so if a similar incident happens in that area, they can make the connection immediately. The officer said that when I parked my car, the man was so angry, likely because he was doing something illegal nearby. That's why he freaked out on me like that. I personally think it was just some deranged individual who enjoyed scaring people who looked like easy prey. When I, 21 and female, was 17, I wanted to au pair, and the only place close to me that I could go to as a 17-year-old was England. I found this family, a mother with 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I messaged them and talked with the mother. She seemed very interested and very nice. We set up a date for me to go, and that was that. When I got to the airport, needless to say, I was very confused when they weren't there to pick me up. I messaged the mother to ask her where they were and if it would take a long time for them to get there. She told me that she was on her way and was just stuck in traffic. I thought to myself, well, okay, that's fair enough. She told me to just go to the exit and wait. Not long after, she told me that she was there and that she was in a blue car. I was looking around very confused, since I didn't really see a blue car anywhere. When I finally noticed it, some other woman than the one I'd been talking to walked out of the car and straight towards me. The instant I made eye contact with the other woman, I got a long text from the woman I was supposed to be working for. It basically said that her husband had come home from the country he worked in, and they had fought because he didn't want an au pair in the house. For some reason, she didn't want to tell me that, so she gave me to her good friend who needed one. I was very confused by that, and a bit scared as well. It all seemed very strange. It felt as if someone had been watching me and waiting for the exact right moment to send that text. The woman initially seemed very friendly, but was really hurrying with taking my things and slamming them in her car while talking to me. I'm a bit nervous and non-confrontational by nature, so I didn't really know what to do or say, other than to just follow her in what she was doing. When it was all done, she told me we should get going, and I told her that I wasn't sure I was really comfortable with this. She told me she understood, but she really needed the help. She had 2 children at home as well. We had to move fast because of the place that she was parked. We got into the car and started driving out of the airport pickup spot. The second we started moving, I told her once again that I wasn't really sure about this. I wanted to get out and stay at the airport. She started to get really upset. She told me that sure she could drop me off, but she had to get out of where we were because she could get a ticket for letting me out there or something. I don't know if that was true or not. That's just what she told me. We drove around for a few minutes, still on the airport grounds, and we stopped a bit away so I could get out and call my parents. I started talking to them, but I noticed that while I was doing so, the woman inside the car was talking to another woman. The one I'd been speaking to initially, I presume. I didn't understand the language, so I couldn't say what exactly they were talking about. When I was done talking, I got into her car again. I told her that I really wanted her to let me out at a specific spot. She kept asking me if I was sure I didn't want to go into town with her. If I didn't want her to drop me off by the shopping center or something. I told her no, that I really just wanted her to let me out by the entrance of the airport. She did, and thankfully I went inside and talked with my parents. After this happened, I got some weird voice memos from her and 2 other people. I couldn't understand them, but it was also strange. My parents tried to contact both of them, but they were immediately blocked. If you don't know, a lot of au pairs are treated very poorly, so for us to feel safe and secure and sure we won't get cheated out of pay or working for more than we're allowed, we have to sign a contract. I found out the contract the initial woman had sent me was completely fake. I don't know how, but the lawyer said it was not legitimate. Her address she had sent me was also fake. Apparently, she didn't live there. I found out later that the city we were supposed to meet up in was a bit of a hot spot for human trafficking. I didn't know that until after all this happened. It was a lot of very sketchy stuff. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this one. Maybe it's not as bad as I think it was. But in the moment, I was sure they were trying to do something bad to me. When I was 18 through 21, I lived in an area in LA called Koreatown. It's a pretty hip place nowadays, I hear. But when I lived there, Koreatown was kind of racially split. South of 8th Street was El Salvadoran MS-13 gang territory, and north was Korean. I lived on the MS side. I saw a whole lot while I lived there. We had a trans prostitution operation in the alley, kids selling drugs, LAPD raids. My neighbor had a mini chop shop in the garage. Stuff was always going down there. I just minded my own business and really did live peacefully there. I never felt unsafe really, but I also never let my guard down when out and about. One day, around 4 p.m. or so, I decided to walk down to a little corner store 2 blocks away. It was a walk I did regularly, so I felt pretty comfortable, but once again my eyeballs were open. I was almost there to the store when this blue Toyota convertible pulls up to the 2-space parking lot. I kept walking but made eye contact with the driver. He was a lifer. For those of you that don't know what that means, he had MS-13 tattooed from his forehead to his chin. This man was not to be fucked with. I gave him a polite nod and walked into the store. I walked back to the drink section, and as I was pulling open the door, that guy was just suddenly there with me. I could feel him breathing on my neck. He started to smell my hair. I could smell the weed and liqueur on his breath. I was absolutely frozen. I felt a fear like I'd never felt before. I'm a generally scrappy girl. I've survived some stuff. I'm confident as well, but in that moment I felt like prey. I was sure that if I did anything that rubbed this man the wrong way, he was going to rear me, kill me, and then go about his business like nothing happened. I just kept moving around the store, grabbing stuff I had no intention of buying. The entire time he was following me, whispering in my ears all the things he wanted to do to me. To this day, I've never had anyone say the disgusting, dirty things this guy was saying to me, all while grabbing himself as well. I don't even know how he stayed so damn close to me, while I tried to move away from him. I can't explain to you the energy this man exuded. In my soul, I knew he was a monster. I kept making eye contact with the men behind the counter, but both of them looked like deer in the headlights. They knew not to make a peep so they didn't set this guy off. I wasn't sure if they would help me, if he decided smelling me and speaking his desires got old. I wasn't sure if he was going to assault me. Suddenly, as soon as he'd come, he just left. I turned around and walked out the door. I didn't buy anything. I don't know if he saw me walking down the street and decided to make contact with me or what. I stayed in that store for probably 30 minutes after he left. The men behind the register helped me put back the things I kept adding to the counter. When I was ready to leave, one of the men went to check if the guy was gone for me. I ran home, and everywhere I went, I was on the lookout for that light metallic blue Toyota convertible. I used to live insanely close to Disneyland, which plays a part later on. I was waiting at a bus stop to get home, which honestly the bus was always late here. That was when this random guy walked up to me and started talking to me. He had on an ACU jacket and sweatpants. He claimed to be military and claimed he was working for some sort of a nightclub. I knew that was bullshit, but I didn't want to be blatantly rude and set this guy off. I was a very non-confrontational teen. I just pretended I was deaf and couldn't understand what he was saying. He continued to talk still and asked me if I wanted to help him attract some people to this club he worked for. I continuously shook my head no. Long story short, he didn't leave until many other people called the police on him. It was obvious he was being quite shady, as well as some harassment details I'll be skipping. He left before the police arrived, of course. Now, this may seem like a minor, creepy incident, but it wasn't until just recently that I found out that a lot of human trafficking actually goes on right nearby Disneyland, and they use the exact tactics that guy tried to use on me that night.